I'm grateful to be here to talk about the perfusions and the research that we do outside of the cardiac OR. And today I'm going to talk about the perfusion we do during isolated limb perfusion. I have no disclosures to make, and to be able to talk about our findings, I have to do a brief overview of what isolated limb perfusion is. It is a regional surgical treatment that we do when the tumors are non-operable or when the tumors are too many to surgically remove. It enables us to isolate an extremity and administer chemotherapy, which is in very high doses. It will only be in the extremity, and the systemic toxicity is then avoided. So we have really high treatment response. So you have to remember that the alternative to this treatment is amputation. So in melanoma, it's 85% of treatment response, whereof 65% is complete response. A little lower numbers in sarcoma, but then the sarcoma often shrinks, so it can be surgically removed after the procedure. So what we do is that we put cannulas in the femoral artery and vein, or in the brachial if we do it in the arm. Then we isolate the leg from the rest of the body with a tourniquet, and all the collaterals as well is isolated. We connect it to a heart and lung machine, and then we start perfusing, and we elevate the temperature, the blood temperature, to 40 degrees. We perfuse for 60 minutes with the chemotherapy in, which is about 100 times the deadly dose if it's given systemically. After we're done, we rinse the chemo and the blood with crystal solution, and then we reestablish the circulation again. So here's just a picture of how it looks when we do ILP on a leg. Another setting, we use an isotope, technetium, so that we can monitor the leakage from the extremity to the body. And we allow a leakage of about 10%, and if it exceeds that percentage, we can abort the procedure. This is very seldom done. We've done more than 1,000 procedures, and we have aborted just twice. So complications, the severe complications are rare, but almost every patient experiences some regional toxicity, where of erythema, edema, and some blistering is usual. It goes in regress after about 4 weeks. We know a lot about the oxygen delivery during whole body perfusion, but it's unknown in extremity perfusion. There's no research that we have found that explains the need of the tissue in an extremity. So to the study, it was published in Perfusion this year. And why? Well, we don't know what the critical level is of DO2 delivery, and if we know this answer, we can optimize the perfusion, and maybe that knowledge would lead us to a research where we can see if an optimized perfusion can increase the response rate or decrease the postoperative toxicity. So our aim was to describe oxygen metabolism, DO2, VO2, and extraction in an isolated extremity during ILP, and also investigate if we could replace the invasive measurements of oxygen by NIRS instead of the invasive CDI that we use today. So we included 40 patients, and we sampled blood at 6 time points during the procedure. DO2, VO2, and extraction was calculated according to the formulas that are standardized, and we had NIRS on both legs, both the treated leg and the leg perfused by the patient himself. And then we excluded all patients which had leakage from the body to the extremity, which would compromise the values because the hemoglobin in the body is higher than in the leg due to the hemodilution of the priming solution. So here's the placement on both legs for the NIRS. And just the baseline characteristics, most of them were men, 75% were men, and it was 71% doing a procedure of a leg. And interesting is that we do have more extraction in a larger extremity, of course, than in a smaller extremity. We can also see the SvO2 is much higher in an arm than in a leg. So to the results. We did a one-way ANOVA to examine the conditions in the leg during the perfusion. And something that we almost knew we would find is that we have a pump flow that is decreasing during the perfusion due to us pumping in a way that we try to prevent leakage. So if we see leakage, we go down in pump flow to increase or decrease the pressure in the extremity to prevent leakage. So because of the pump flow reducing in almost all patients during the procedure, we also see a lower delivery of oxygen through the procedure and a higher level of oxygen extraction. What is interesting is that we have a lactate value that is increasing in the leg. Still pretty good values, but it's increasing. In an arm, it is decreasing, but you see it's high level to start with, and that had to do with the fact that in arms we had to add donor blood in the priming solution. So it starts at high, but then it goes down during the perfusion. Then we use the NIRS so that we can compare the extremity perfused by the ECC and the native perfused extremity. And during the perfusion, we see that the ECC values are higher the whole way through than the values that the patient produces on his own. So here is a scatter plot with DO2 and O2 extractions, and science agree that an O2 extraction below 30 and lactate below 3 is a normal good state. So we set our cutoff point at 30 in O2 extraction, and then we had 4 patients doing an ILP on a leg that were above 30%, and then we saw that they all had DO2 delivery over 170 mL per minute per square meters. So we could by this give some guidelines on what delivery of oxygen is secure to give our patients. We do have patients delivering, where we delivered really low DO2, but still the lactate values were low or decreasing, and the O2 extractions were low. So we do come to a conclusion that 170 mL of DO is safe limit to deliver above. We also did the correlations between oxygen parameters invasively and non-invasive, and we saw a correlation between the venous saturation in the extremity and the NIRS, and it was significant, 0.568. But even if we saw this correlation that was significant, we didn't know if we could let them work interchangeable. So we did a Blunt-Altman plot where we plotted the patients, and an acceptable agreement is around 30%, and we had, not agreement, sorry, error, and we had an error of 32.5, which is a fairly good agreement, but still not an agreement that we would say that we would recommend the methods to be swapped. So to a conclusion, we recommend that we don't go below 170 mils of delivered O2 during the perfusions. And even though we have a correlation between invasively and non-invasively measured oxygen parameters, we don't recommend to let them work interchangeable. So that is it.